Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are carrying with you and all that your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us today. If you are visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat and tell us where you are joining us from? The Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, our senior minister, regrets that she is not able to be with us this morning as scheduled. She is recovering from a temporary illness not related to COVID. We bless her need to rest, and we look forward to seeing her again soon. I'm honored to introduce our pulpit guest, the Reverend Nancy McDonald-Ladd. Reverend McDonald-Ladd serves as senior minister at River Road Unitarian Universalist Congregation. In 2018, she published her first book, After the Good News, Progressive Faith Beyond Optimism. She lives with her family in Bethesda, Maryland, and is delighted to join us for worship today. Reverend Nancy, it's great to have you with us. Finally, I welcome everyone to our worship service by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action.
Good morning. Indeed, it is such a pleasure and a joy to be with you in a congregation so ably led by my friend Jennifer and your spectacular team here at First Church. Our opening words are from Raymond Carver, a little poem about what it is we really want. He writes, "And did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth. And so may we together, on this day and all the days to come, build a community and a world in which all are beloved, all are protected, and all are worthy of our highest sacrifices and aspirations."
I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomczyk Carlson, and it is my honor to serve as the Minister of Religious Education at the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. The story I have for you today is called The Great Realization by Tomos Roberts, with art by Nomoko. Tell me the one about the virus again, and then I'll go to bed. But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head. Please, that's one's my favorite. I promise, just one more. Take me back to 2020. That's all I'm asking for. Okay, snuggle down. My boy, though I know you know full well, the story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty. Back then, before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across the lands, but they swelled and they got much bigger than any of us ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day. with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. Every day, the skies grew thicker till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below we filled our cars. We drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out, already wrapped. But then, in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted, told us all, hide away. But while we were hidden, amidst the fear, and all the while, we dusted off our instincts. We remembered how to smile. We started clapping to say thank you and calling our moms. And while the car keys gathered dust, we would look forward to our runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but there was good news in the making. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new. And every single simple act of kindness was now given its due. And so, when we found the cure, and we were all allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. But why did it take a virus to bring people back together? Well, sometimes you get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. So lie down and dream of tomorrow and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many, but that's the story of how it got started and why hindsight's 2020. The end.
Dear ones, because of the unprecedented times in which we are living and the ways our lives are touched by the grief and loss of this global coronavirus pandemic, we are continuing our pandemic practice of lighting the COVID candle for any of our members who have had a loved one die during this period, either from COVID or another cause. If you have had a loved one die from coronavirus or another cause during this time and would like the COVID candle lit in their honor during Sunday worship, please contact one of the ministers. Sharon and Rod DePews, close family friend. Devani Turner Basie died on Tuesday, April 20th, from gunshot wounds he experienced on April 18th. He was young. He was 17 years old. Today, we light our candle in honor of Devani Turner Basie.
As we come into a time of prayer and meditation, I invite you indeed to hold it all. The heartbreak and the hope, the yearning for a great realization, the hope that we have together reached a time of turning. Won't you join me? Take a good seat right where you are and a deep breath for a time of prayer, of focus, and of centering down. Spirit of life and source of love, we come together today in grief, yes. For Devani, a teenager in a long line of those too young, too strong, too capable, too full of light to be lost so young. We gather today with our grief and our hope, clamoring right up alongside each other, knowing that in our grief and in our yearning to move forward, we must find also a deepened commitment. A commitment to building and creating a world where the bullets cease to fly and the hatred ceases to kill, and the people yearning for a way forward find it, not alone, not isolated, not in mere pockets, but together as one body, one spirit, called to build the world that we have been dreaming about and can only realize through the holy prayer of our own hands and bodies and hearts in motion. Spirit of life, source of love, hold Devani's family, hold the families of all those who grieve. Guide us and goad us to be and become more fundamentally empathetic creatures. May we do what we can do and be the most gracious humans we can be. And may we do it always together. Amen. And blessed be.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Flow with the wind, rise in the seas. Move in my hand, giving life a shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Good morning. My name's Kevin Gibson, and I'm pleased to be your worship associate today. I'll be in the virtual coffee hour after today's service, and you're welcome to join me there. Well, whatever became of that Kevin Gibson? That's a question I've been asking of others lately. Let me tell you why. Just over a year ago, I visited my son in New York City during spring break. After I'd been back about a week, I developed a very nasty barking cough. Then the symptoms multiplied on me. Chest pain, lack of appetite, chills, a temperature, and fatigue. The reason that I'm sharing this is that it was probably the worst thing I've ever lived through. Quite literally, I felt I could die. A very black cloud hung over me when I was in significant pain and discomfort. But luckily I'm here and I'm happy to evangelize the benefits of vaccination and masking. Now, the whole experience has led me to think about mortality, and it's left me doing things I didn't do before, including reading obituaries and Googling old acquaintances. It's also made me consider how I'd like to summarize my life in a few paragraphs. It strikes me that there are a couple of directions I could take. I could talk about my accomplishments, operating a follow spotlight at the ice show, driving a double-decker bus, or having a textbook translated into Albanian. But there's another way to go, perhaps talking about the sort of person I want to be instead of the things I've done. So I'd like people to say things like, he was kind, generous, understanding, compassionate, fun. Maybe we throw modest in the mix. When I think of who I am and who I want to become, I reflect on the times that I've come up short. They aren't usually about missed opportunities or not making the grade, but the times I wasn't my best self, not listening well when someone has turned to me for help, not being in the moment when someone's had an unwelcome diagnosis, being curt when I should have spent more time with a friend in need, or not summoning up moral courage in the face of institutional injustice. Those reflections, it seems to me, highlight two truisms. One is that we can't be virtuous in isolation. Robinson Crusoe on his island can't be kind or loving alone. Our virtues and failings are always expressions of our interactions with others in communal settings. And secondly, it's very hard to work out what to do in the moment. How do I create a life where I become more kind, more compassionate, or more courageous? When I contemplate my own, hopefully distant obituary, I wonder how I ought to act to live up to my own aspirations and become my best self. The one I'd like people to find when they wonder whatever became of the kid they knew way back when. Seems to me we don't get to be better people by thinking too hard about it. It's a question of practice. And that's why First Church has been so important. It's a community of practice where people tell stories of their own journeys and insights and also give suggestions of how to turn that discernment into action. I still need help in that department. I'm happy to have my spirit nurtured, my mind engaged, and be inspired to act. But I need a loving community to help me, give me that nudge, that reminder, those opportunities to grow, and turn those aspirations into practice. And for that, I'll be forever grateful.
At the start of any given day, there is mystery available. There is a game waiting for an open heart to say yes. Here I am, I'll play. And if we're smart, we'll listen to the way, and all the misery that held us down, we'll let it fade. Let it be outshined by a simple spark of a life that's waiting to be made. It's waiting to be made. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide what you will make? At the start of any given day, there is history and poetry. There is a play, but you're not in the audience. You are the star. So get out there and say what you will make. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide just what you will make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? And what will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide what you will make?
So somewhere along a little used woodland trail in a not at all famous park in a non-bustling corner of Olympia, Washington, there is a telephone. The telephone is one of those old-fashioned kinds with actual buttons to push, with a real receiver on a cord you can pick up, you can cradle between your head and shoulder, hands-free the old-fashioned way. The phone in this place is affixed to a plywood board that is anchored about halfway up the gnarled trunk of a sturdy old tree. But beyond that tree, the telephone is connected to absolutely nothing. No wires, no hookup, no satellite signal, no beaming tower of mass communication technology, nothing at all. It is, as they say, the telephone of the wind. And people make their way to it, to that lonely place. Sometimes from hundreds of miles away, people make their way there on a pilgrimage to pick up that empty line and be heard by exactly no one. Or perhaps they make their way there in the midst of their sorrows and their joys. Perhaps they make their way there to pick up that empty line and be corrected by no one on the other end. Maybe they pick it up to speak what truth there is to speak and to receive the concerns and advice, best wishes and worried intentions of exactly nobody. From the telephone of the wind, there are no, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." There are no, "But have you considered this is?" Or "Have you thought of that?" There are no, "I can't even imagine." Instead, there is only space and silence and intention that somebody put into every beat of the hammer that anchored that obsolete device to its lonely perch there on a tree you really have to look for to find. The people go there to pick up the telephone of the wind and to speak out into the empty air what human witnesses often cannot receive or will not receive or are not fully able to receive. And the number of people who go to that place and who speak into that receiver of that empty phone, it's almost too large for the lonely spot in the woods right there to manage. And to a person, people report out how deeply and profoundly comforted they are. when they speak what truth they have out into that silence. The telephone of the wind was placed there on that tree in November of this pandemic era, after a journalist from Olympia, Washington, learned of a similar installation in Otuchi, Japan. The telephone of the wind in Japan was placed on a lonely sea-whipped hilltop in 2011, right after a massive earthquake and tsunami washed tens of thousands of people from that coastal town right out to sea with it. The people came to that first installation of a silent phone to speak into the wind the words they never had the chance to say before the crashing waves claimed the ones they loved. They went there to talk about boring things and beautiful things, to give updates and tidbits about everyday life, and of course they went there to weep for what could not be, given all that they had lost. And so in these pandemic times, when a wave of loss crashes just as surely over the shores of our own nation, another installation was made of that silent telephone, and the messages sent out are so much the same, and yet each so unique. And it occurs to me that sometimes we speak our hurt out into nothingness because at least the nothingness is able to receive it. At least the nothingness can bear up under its presence, can meet the sorrow or the loneliness or the simplicity of loss without fixing or advising, without correcting or backing away. Indeed, there are so many ways we human beings create a distance between ourselves and each other's suffering. There are so many ways we protect ourselves and our imaginations from the deep down empathy that would help us understand and receive and bear witness. I can't imagine, we say so often when we are met by another's story. When the truth is so often just the opposite. It is not that we can't imagine, we can imagine. It's just that it hurts too much to do so. It's just that we frankly don't want to. And where I live and where I serve in ministry, right here outside of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., I'm reminded that this winter, over 500 massive beams of light were installed to shine out at the reflecting pool near the Lincoln Memorial. Over 500 beams of light shining over the city and this nation, one for each of 1,000 people. 1,000 people in each beam of light, 500,000 Americans who have died in this tsunami of loss that we share. 500 beams of light, dedicated with the ringing sounds of music and eloquent in their silence, like a message whispered out into the waiting world, carrying the deeper truth of what we have lost, if only we have the courage to attend to it fully. It reminds me of how you, right here in your congregation, light a COVID candle every week as a declaration of something very like communal empathy, a chance to finally do something other than hold the consequences of our suffering at bay. The lights that flicker and shine help our imaginations to grasp the immensity of it all, not just because it's a time-honored ritual, but because, in fact, we have lived through things we truly could never have imagined before. How many of you, like me, could literally never have imagined what this time has been? Over a year in our homes, the great cloud of fear, school through a computer screen, congregations transformed. Who could imagine? Who would have wanted to? And while it is not a silver lining, it is at least a strange veiled blessing that this time in our shared history has equipped us to imagine things that some among us could never have fully let into our hearts before. We don't have to stretch our imagination to know what it feels like for the country's fate to hang in the balance. We don't have to work to understand the reality of loss, the fear for bodily safety. We don't have to think with paternalistic safe distance of all those others out there who are hurting and hoping for a new day. Instead, we can imagine great loss and great fear and great upheaval, because we have together experienced it. And it is possible to use that hard-won expansion of empathy as a tool for courage and commitment in all that lies ahead. I remember back in the very beginning of the pandemic days, last February, we have friends of my congregation, faith partners in China. And back in the beginning, when Wuhan was first on lockdown and the people I know and love could not leave their homes except for groceries, I thought, I can't imagine what it must be like. I think back on members of my congregation who have served in the foreign service all around the world, telling me stories over the years of what it's like to live in a politically unstable, violent country where people fear for their lives on a daily basis. I remember my congregants telling me of the political instability and roiling power grabs in less democratic nations, of people in distant places running literally from their lives. I can't imagine, I thought then, what it must be like. But of course we can. So much more than we ever dared, so much more. Because we have lived it. We can imagine because we have endured it. We can imagine because those of us who have made it this far are accompanied by a great cloud of witnesses who did not. And I remember that last March, right after my own church closed the physical doors, right when yours did too, I remember that the mother of one of the staff members of my congregation, living in China, she sent surgical masks to us at our church in the United States by mail in these big padded packages, because back then we couldn't get them here. And she could imagine what we were going through in this place. She could imagine it. And her empathy translated quickly and lovingly into action. The mother of someone who cared for my congregation could imagine. And so even though we were strangers, she took care of us because her empathy was awakened by her experience. Just at Christmas this year, you all probably know about the UU Partner Church program. Perhaps you have partner churches around the world just like we do. And just at Christmas this year, our partner church in Fiat-Falva in Transylvania, they recorded a video of some of the church's children singing traditional Christmas songs, and they sent them to me. It arrived in my inbox on Christmas Eve, late at night, with the message, praying for you all in the US with all our love in this difficult time. They thought of us and sent us blessings because they could imagine, and their empathy extended across oceans. Empathy, it seems, is not dead. It is, of course, a natural inclination of the human condition, and both individually and collectively, when we reach out to imagine the suffering of another, not as a paternalistic offer to help or a knee-jerk reaction to fix what cannot be fixed. When we reach out with deepest empathy born of experience, we meet this world and each other with understanding and forbearance. Sometimes our fellow humans, even our nation itself. Very often our congregations can be gracious enough to hold it all, even when the words for what we have lost are so profound we can barely speak them out loud. St. Paul, in the Christian tradition, he famously described the members of a community as yoke fellows, the ones who bear each other's burdens. He said that it is the work of a community to imagine what others might feel and to transform that empathy into a continued willingness to pull along whatever weight needs to be pulled so that none might bear the heaviest weight alone. In Zen Buddhism, there is a concept called gaman, which loosely translated means endurance of the seemingly unbearable with patience and with dignity, but more generally translates as a kind of collective shared perseverance. the ability to lift up the larger good above the individual need, to work with others to create a space for everyone's hurt, and yes, a space for everyone's hope. Space to bear witness without backing away, to imagine and truly empathize with each other, not just to empathize with each other's sorrow, but each other's enduring joy. Indeed, turns out not all the messages spoken out into the silence of the telephone of the wind were messages of suffering. Some of those messages, left to the silence, spoke of beauty, of what wonders still await alongside our loss, of the great realizations that accompany that loss. Some of the messages spoken into that silence were of love, a love that outlives even the tsunamis that cannot quite sweep it all away. Some of those messages are of hopefulness for a new day that is still dawning right now. And some of those messages speak of joy for what is unfolding in our lives through the gentle and persistent empathy of the people we share the journey with. The artist who installed the telephone of the wind, Tyler Denbeck, he's a travel writer. And when he first put it up, that installation in the woods, the first call he made was to his mom, who had died quite a number of years before. He felt awkward at first, he said, but then he just said hi. He told her about his life. He told her a few stories about the days that were given to him, these astonishing times through which we're living even in her absence. And so may we share into the silence and to one another. May we share the truths of our own losses and our own hope and our own enduring love. May we be yoke fellows for one another, pulling along what must be moved forward if we are all going to survive. And may the lights that you have kindled week after week, lights of grief and of hope in this place, may those lights shine out in memory for all that has broken our bodies and broken our hearts. A testament that we do not grieve alone, but together, with one another in the silence and the song, in the commitment and the grace of each new moment. Amen.
When I hear your voice, I almost cry. And when you laugh, it makes me sigh. When I read your words, I wonder why we're together now, more than ever now.
And though distant you may seem to be, you really aren't so far from me. I can feel you here right where I am. If you close your eyes, maybe you can.
Sing to me now, sing me a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand side by side. When I see your face, oh, how you shine, a precious light, a star divine.
How your beauty just reflects back mine. Hold out your heart like a lifeline.
Sing to me now, sing me a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand side by side. I say to you now, I sing you a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand
Thank you all so much for your generosity. Pledges are the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity, and we are also grateful for additional gifts to support our ministry and thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or by giving on our website. Your gifts help us continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. The League of Women Voters Milwaukee County is our April Share the Plate recipient. Their nonpartisan mission is to encourage informed and active participation in government and influence public policy through education and advocacy. You can go to their website and give with the note "Share the Plate" from FUSM. You can see all these options on your screen now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving right now or when you come back later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you.
And so, as we take this light that we have kindled out into the waiting world, may you go then to be who you already are. You are the beloved and precious children of everything that is sacred in this world. And the joy and the justice, the goodness and mercy, the power and the possibility of the Spirit are at loose in you and through you in the world. So go then to be who you already are, and may you be abundantly blessed. Amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.